What up? Alright, so today we got another Zelda video. I am wondering, what is the best overworld boss in Tears of the Kingdom? So we're going to go through each boss that this game has to offer, including the ones that appeared in Breath of the Wild, and just sort of discuss the merits of each, what Tears of the Kingdom brings to the table that may be improved upon or changed the way you fight some of these bosses that were in Breath of the Wild too. So we're going to start with the overworld bosses, and the first we have is the Hinox. So the Hinox obviously appeared in Breath of the Wild. Super cool in that game to see this enemy return, which had previously been in like A Link Between Worlds and Link to the Past. Except this time around, he was way harder. You had to shoot his eye. And it was super fun in Breath of the Wild because he had all these strange ways that you could kind of take him down by like either shooting his eye as the weak point and then attacking his legs, or you could, just do all the Breath of the Wild things like launch bomb arrows at him, or you could just skip all that and like jump onto his hand, which he would then pull up to his chest while he was sleeping, and you could just take all the weapons off of his necklace, which was awesome. And there's one other quirk with this boss, which he still does in Tears of the Kingdom, which is that the higher leveled versions have like metal covering their ankles, so you can't really attack their legs the same way. So it kind of forces you to be a little creative. This boss is still good, but I would say it's not really as improved as some of the other ones that we'll get to in a minute here, as far as like changing up how they interact with the world in Tears of the Kingdom. Still really fun, still fun to shoot his eye. So for right now, we're going to label this one good. Alright, let's go to the Stone Talus. So Stone Talus also appeared in Breath of the Wild. There's a number of different versions. There's the stone, there's the frost, and there's the fire. It's called Igneo Talus. And these are still pretty fun to fight. One big difference now is that you can use Ascend to like just launch yourself right through the boss, which is hilarious to think about. Like, if this Stone Talus is alive and it has like guts on the inside, are you like technically like going through the guts of this boss? Like, that's really silly, but it's really fun when the Talus is like about to drop down on your head and you use Ascend. And for a brief moment, you're like, oh flip, I'm totally going to die. But then Ascend works at like the last second. Like, you get that little green icon and you hear the Ascend like bleep sound, and you just launch through his body. It's so satisfying. And then you're right there next to the weak spot to just wail away at that giant ore chunk that's like his heart or whatever. So that's a super fun boss, and like honestly improved in Tears of the Kingdom because of the way you can use Ascend at the right time. Super fun idea. I also like how the Stone Taluses drop like stone hearts, and the Frost and Igneo Taluses also drop like elemental hearts, which you can like fuse to your weapons, which is a super fun addition. Really great idea. Like, Nintendo really did figure out a way to encourage me to actually fight some of these bosses that I would start skipping in Breath of the Wild, because I would think to myself like, oh, I'm going to Hebra, and right now I'm in Death Mountain, so let me just fight this Igneo Talus I stumbled upon, get his like fire heart thing, and then you can just kill the frost enemies in one hit. It's just a little more interesting than like maybe just stumbling upon like a flame sword by chance. So I really like that, and really cool stuff they added to the Stone Talus. Alright, I separated out the Stalnox from the Hinox because it's more different in my opinion than like Igneo and Frost Taluses. Especially because like the way you have to fight it is pretty different. This fight is largely unchanged in Tears of the Kingdom. You're whacking away at like a skull version of the Hinox, and then all of a sudden his eye pops out and you gotta wail on the eye. It's a pretty fun fight. I still like it, but for the purposes of this video, I think it's a little lesser than the Stone Talus. Oh, also, I'm going to give the Stone Talus a grade. So I think the Stone Talus is a bit better than the Hinox because it's so improved. But the Stalnox is still just like, it's still like base level fun. Like, it's tough for any of these bosses to get worse, so I'd still say it's good. But the only real difference is that there's like more of them in Tears of the Kingdom, and they appear like more often in like caves, which is sort of an interesting area for them to show up. But the fight is pretty similar, and I guess if you really wanted to get a little nitpicky, you could still say that like Yes, they do drop like new fusible items, which is different over Breath of the Wild, but I specifically like the elemental drops with the Talus. Like, that was a really cool specific change. I don't know, I still like the Talus more. I think the Stelnox is fine, but we're gonna give it a good still. Alright, now let's talk about the Battle Talus. We're sort of flopping back and forth here. Now this is like really, really great. Like, if the Hinox and the Stelnox are good, the Talus is great because it improves stuff and allows you to fight the boss differently than in Breath of the Wild. The Battle Talus would be, I would say, really great. Like, it's not quite excellent, but it is really great. Like, it's really cool to see a big fortress of bokoblins in the distance and be like, oh, yep, they still have those in this game. And then you're running over there expecting to just take out some simple red guys. And then the ground shakes and like this giant stone guy gets out of the ground with the whole fortress on his back. Honestly, such a great idea. And this is even, like, you're even more encouraged to use Ascend through the fortresses on the back of the Battle Taluses because they're so high above you. You don't have to like time anything weird like you do with the Taluses. Like, you can just run right up under some of the wood and use Ascend. It's really great and it's fun because this one is more like totally new than the Talus. Like, this one feels like a pretty different fight because this type of character didn't even exist in the last game. So I'm gonna give this one a really great. It's also really hard to fight because you kind of have to take out all the bokoblins if they're shooting arrows at you, especially if it's doing a lot of damage before you can even, you know, hurt the Talus. So really good way of incorporating Ascend, and I really like this boss. All right, let's talk about Molduga. Molduga is still good. There's not a ton to say about Molduga. I thought Molduga was so fun in Breath of the Wild. It's especially fun when you're on a sand seal and you're riding alongside a Molduga and that music kicks in and you have to like launch the bombs at him, and then he, like, especially when he flies out of the ground, you got to launch bombs at him and he like falls on his back and you can hit his belly. I just think it's a fun fight. It's not super changed versus Breath of the Wild, but still fun. So let's give that one a good. All right, let's talk about what I think might be the best overworld boss in Tears of the Kingdom. It's got to be the Flux Construct. And this one is kind of frustrating because it's literally just a bunch of Minecraft blocks like stuck together. But because it's so like particle based, like he's like Knack, he's like all these different chunks of block. You can use like reverses. You can use the recall on the blocks to like pull yourself up to where he's hovering above the stage. You can use Ascend to jump through like the platform he makes in the sky. Really, really awesome. And when you beat him, you get a really like some pretty powerful fuse, like fuse materials, like those spinning rods, like the eyes or whatever. Super cool fight. Like that incorporates both of those abilities so well, Ascend and Recall. It's hard to not think of this one as the best one. So I would say this one is excellent. All right, the Frox, super cool, like such a cool boss. I love the way the Frox looks. This was probably the most surprising because you get to the depths and at least for me, I was like, wow, it's super dark down here, and I was really terrified that there'd be some massive hulking beast around every corner, and for the most part, there actually was not. Like, it's just big statues, and like, they do a lot of like fake scariness, like you expect there to be something terrifying around the corner, but then there's just like big walls, and like, you know, regular enemies. But then all of a sudden, I see this like hulking moving figure in the distance that has a slightly shiny shell. And I'm like, what the flip is? I get slightly closer to it and it whips around and there's like this massive glowing eyeball. I actually freaked out the first time I found this guy. So the surprise factor is way better than the Flux Construct, but the actual fight plays out like a Dodongo mixed with a Talus. So like, it's just, obviously you gotta shoot bombs into his mouth. And then once, so like that's like King Dodongo from Ocarina of Time. And then once you do that, you can finally jump onto his back and, you know, wail away at the stone bits, just like with the Talus. Super good fight, but I don't know, it's tough. It's tough to put this one above the Flux Construct. So I'm going to say this one is great just because it's new and it's still really fun. Gliok is excellent. I think Gliok is a really fun fight. It really encourages you to like build a flying machine or build a like hot air balloon or something that can get you up into the air, or use your rockets. So this one really plays off of the verticality of Tears of the Kingdom, which I think is a great improvement to like how you fight bosses in this game versus Breath of the Wild. It's difficult to get into the air. It's difficult to shoot all three heads. You have to use the slow-mo well. Really love how he like launches even further up into the sky, so that you have to like, you're basically forced to not just use a rocket. You have to like climb up something and then use a rocket to even get to where he is. So I think these fights are really fun. It's a big plus that you get the elemental wings or the horns after you beat this creature. So I don't know, I think Gliok is excellent. And that leaves us with Phantom Ganon. This, I'm a little mixed on this, because I think people associate the Gloom Hands with like the Guardians. So I think people seem to think that like the Gloom Hands are a replacement for the Guardians. But in my opinion, they're such a worse replacement because they don't surround the castle. So there's no obvious thing that they're specifically doing. You just find them in random places. Like there's one on that Akala tower, like right before you climb the tower. Or you don't even climb towers in this game. You just get the pedestal that launches you into the sky. So right before that lookout tower, there's just a random Gloom Hands there. Which, I don't know, I thought the Guardians were a great fight in Breath of the Wild, and it was so fun how they were the thing protecting the castle. But Tears of the Kingdom arguably improves that whole journey to the final boss by making it a bit more linear and underground. So you're forced to power up in the overworld and then take on this Dark Souls-esque like enemy gauntlet that's a bit more linear in the depths once you even figure out where that is, because you need specific light routes to even see that on the map. So they didn't need the Guardians this time, so they just made these Gloom Hands like kind of randomly dotted around the map. But they're obviously, they look really cool. Visually, they get like big points, like excellent points for visual design. But in terms of gameplay, they're randomly scattered, and you just climb up some mountain and they can't even get to you. So like, it's just frustrating that like they're such a fun, scary enemy that's hard to run away from. But then once you get any level of like height on them, it's just game over. You just shoot them with arrows over and over, or do the slow-mo and kill them. And then they turn into Phantom Ganon, which in my opinion is so random, and I personally wish they had left Phantom Ganon as like a singular boss inside the Deku Tree, because even though I had the experience of like never actually wanting to tackle the Gloom Hands, and then for the first time ever being forced to fight them in the Deku Tree and seeing Phantom Ganon, I think it would have been like a guaranteed moment of excellence for Tears of the Kingdom if the Gloom Hands were just their own thing, and then Phantom Ganon was only a boss fight, specifically in the Great Deku Tree. This fight is fine. It's like a basic combat fight with a gloomy guy who can kind of take away your hearts. And I love the weapon he gives you afterwards, how it takes away your hearts, but it's pretty powerful. So honestly, the fight is fine, but I'm frustrated with the execution, so I'm just going to give him a good. Alright, so those are all the overworld bosses. If I had to pick a winner for all the overworld bosses, it just has to be the Flux Construct. It's so fun. It just uses the abilities so well, but Gliok is a close second. I think Gliok's also really good. So because of the way that you can use Recall and Ascend, it's got to be the Flux Construct. Super great boss.